Welcome to Behind the Investigation. I'm investigative reporter Sierra Cummings, joined now by Rachel Polanski on our investigative team. Good to have you, Rachel.
Thanks so much.
I'm excited about this story because I've said so many times we need to do more healthcare investigations, just a wealth of stories there. So this is right on the money with this, related to Adderall and the surrounding shortage.
Yeah, so this Adderall shortage has been ongoing for close to a year and a half now. And when you talk with people who have ADHD, we're being told that they have to go to all different pharmacies to try and get their prescriptions filled.
Wow.
Now, amid this shortage, we're learning that there is another group of people that is being diagnosed with ADHD. While most people think it's children that have ADHD, and that is a large percentage, we're now seeing more adult women receiving this diagnosis. So I talked with a psychiatrist and I talked with an adult woman to take a closer look at why. Let's watch the story.
I was so stressed out working 2 jobs and being a full-time grad student.
Miranda Johnson was 26 years old when she received her ADHD diagnosis.
And so I went through the whole process of getting referred to a psychologist, getting properly diagnosed, and then, of course, getting proper medication to treat it.
She felt a night and day difference. She could focus, pay attention to detail, and things were going well until October of 2022.
So that's when I started the phone game of calling multiple pharmacies.
Suddenly, pharmacies were running out of Adderall. The FDA even made a formal announcement that drug makers were unable to produce enough medication for those with ADHD. As a result, millions of patients, like Miranda, began facing refill delays at their pharmacies.
And so then I switched to another pharmacy, and then that one ran out, switched to another one. So I've gone through probably about 4 pharmacies.
While manufacturing disruptions were initially blamed for the shortage, a new study from JAMA Psychiatry revealed that prescriptions for ADHD medication have jumped by more than 14% since the start of the pandemic. So why the prescription surge? Dr. Subrat Bhargave believes that telehealth played a large part.
I think that there was some evaluations that perhaps were less than thorough that might have resulted in a person being prescribed medication that wasn't necessarily part of what they really needed.
While Dr. Bhargave says that overdiagnosing is taking place, he also believes that doctors have gotten better at diagnosing adults with ADHD.
And so for a long time, what physicians and other clinicians were looking out for in terms of symptoms, they were basing it on the ways in which a young boy might present, whereas a young girl who has ADHD may not look that way.
And so, he says the prescription surge, coupled with supply chain issues, has created a perfect storm. One that Miranda Johnson continues to battle each month as she walks from pharmacy to pharmacy.
It's kind of like luck of the draw every time you go.
Trying to get the medication she needs.
I hope it gets better, I really do.
To her point, we all hope it gets better. Any end in sight here that you know of?
Not that we're hearing about, but I do have some takeaways for those who are going to the pharmacy and trying to get their prescriptions filled. 1, talk to your doctor. Maybe they can change the medication or the dosage. And 2, do what Miranda does and go to different pharmacies. That way you might be able to see if one doesn't have it in stock, maybe another will. One thing to note here, though, if you call pharmacies, because Adderall is a Schedule II drug, they don't have to tell you if they have it in stock. So you might actually have to go physically in person to find out, and that can be a lot for people.
Yeah, really good takeaways there. So many people ask us, how do we get our stories? Walk us through this one. What made you want to do this particular investigation?
Sure. So we've been talking for a year and a half about this Adderall shortage, and I saw a lot of stories about that, but I was curious why we were seeing this Adderall shortage. And we had all heard about the supply chain disruptions, but it's kind of like, why is that still happening a year and a half later? And when I started doing some research, I found this JAMA Psychiatry study, and that pointed to the increase in diagnoses among young adult women. And I just thought that was so interesting. Like so many other people, I always thought ADHD was really something that affected children.
Yeah.
So when I saw this, I was like, wow, that's really interesting. I wondered if we were seeing it here. And so I actually got on Nextdoor, which I do a lot of the time, to try to find people to talk to in our stories. And I looked for people talking about the Adderall shortage. And then I looked for women. And I asked if anybody would be willing to talk to me about being a woman with an ADHD diagnosis who was facing difficulties finding their prescriptions at pharmacies. And Miranda agreed to talk to me.
Wow, that's so interesting. I'm also curious about why the data shows the double that higher rate among women. Do you know any factors that are playing with those numbers? Is it just because more women are going to get tested?
So there's a few different variables here. So the psychiatrist I talked to believes that overdiagnosing is taking place. During the pandemic, we saw an increase in telehealth and more psychiatrists that maybe weren't fully licensed or as knowledgeable as they should be.
It wasn't like their specialty.
Correct. It
Right.
wasn't their specialty.
Right.
And because it was telehealth and it was the pandemic, he does believe that overdiagnosing took place. And that's why we saw some of this increase that we're seeing. He also thinks, though, that some licensed counselors are just learning how to diagnose it better. They used to think, this was something that how little boys would present, this is something how girls would present, and now they're seeing different variables for women, and things that they thought might be anxiety could be ADHD. So he thinks it's a combination of that overdiagnosing, he thinks it's a combination of doctors getting better at diagnosing, and he does think that that supply chain disruption did play a role, though not as big of a role as we had initially thought.
It also kind of speaks to the shift in perspective and just being holistic and understanding what an individual is going through and what symptoms they may be presenting.
Absolutely, and I think for a long time it was kind of taboo to talk about mental illness and mental health concerns, and now it's really not. So I think that's part of it too. And the psychiatrist I talked to even said that a lot of times he would have a mom coming in bringing her son or daughter about ADHD. And in talking with him and in hearing what the kid had to say, she was like, wow, I'm experiencing that too.
Wow.
And that's how he realized that, there was this increase happening among adult women.
Wow, excellent work there. We're so grateful for this storytelling. Thank you so much for taking us behind the investigation on this. Don't forget to watch, listen, tune in to all of our work. You can find it wherever you listen to your podcasts, YouTube, across all social media. Thanks so much for having us.